The 19th century didn't belong to oil. It didn't belong to steel, and it didn't belong to banks, at least not yet. For a brief and dangerous window in modern history, the world ran on cotton. At the center of that world wasn't London, Paris, or New York. It was a stretch of land in the American South, worked by enslaved labor, leveraged by credit, and embedded deep within global finance, a system whose apparent efficiency depended on the legal erasure of human beings. Welcome to YieldVerse, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. When most people imagine the pre-Civil War American South, they picture an agrarian backwater, plantations, fields, and a regional economy lagging behind northern industry. It's a comforting image. It's also wrong. In the decades before 1861, the Southern cotton economy was not peripheral to global capitalism. It was one of its load-bearing pillars. Built on coercion so absolute that the system functioned with terrifying consistency. By the early 1800s, the Industrial Revolution had transformed Europe, especially Britain, into a machine that consumed raw materials at an unprecedented scale. Textile mills multiplied. Cities swelled. Cotton became the single most important industrial input on Earth. It was light, durable, cheap to transport, endlessly adaptable, and there was no substitute. By the 1830s, the United States produced the majority of the world's raw cotton, most of it from the southern states, in some years. American cotton supplied more than 3/4 of the cotton used by British industry. The industrial core of the global economy removed southern cotton, and factories stalled, workers starved, exports collapsed, government revenues shrank. This wasn't a niche commodity, it was systemic. But cotton wasn't just grown and sold. It was financialized long before modern derivatives markets. Planters borrowed against future harvests. Banks extended credit based on projected yields. Merchants issued letters of credit backed by cotton that hadn't yet left the fields. Cotton became collateral, standardized, predictable, globally liquid. This predictability came at an extraordinary human cost. Enslaved people were recorded as capital on balance sheets, valued alongside land and output forecasts. Legally denied personhood, so the financial system could treat their forced labor as a stable input. Southern plantations operated less like farms and more like asset factories. Land was leveraged. Output was monetized in advance. Human beings were reduced to entries in ledgers. This structure tied the Southern economy directly into international banking networks, particularly those centered in London. British financiers didn't need to own land in Mississippi to profit from it. They only needed cotton, and the system that guaranteed its production regardless of human suffering. Ships carried southern cotton across the Atlantic. British mills spun it into textiles. Finished goods were exported worldwide. Profits cycled back through insurers, shippers, merchants, and banks. At every step, finance skimmed value. Quietly, predictably, relentlessly. The system appeared efficient precisely because its costs were borne by people who had no legal ability to refuse it. This is why calling the antebellum South pre-industrial misses the point. The South wasn't industrial in machinery, it was industrial in finance. Cotton exports became one of the largest sources of foreign exchange for the United States. They paid for imports, supported banking expansion, underwrote economic growth far beyond the region itself. In practical terms, cotton functioned as the South's monetary anchor, not because it was moral, but because markets reward reliability without regard for how reliability is enforced. This produced a dangerous confidence among Southern elites. King Cotton. The belief was simple. If the world depended on Southern cotton, then the South held leverage over the world. If Britain needed cotton, Britain would never allow the supply to be disrupted. It's a familiar mistake. When you control a critical input, it's easy to believe you control the system. But leverage only works if your counterpart has no alternatives, and global finance has always been ruthless about finding them. For decades, the numbers seemed to justify the confidence. Cotton dominated American exports, credit flowed easily, prices remained strong, the system looked stable, even elegant, if one ignored who paid the price. But there was a flaw. It wasn't moral, it was financial. The South controlled production, it did not control liquidity. Much of the capital financing plantations came from northern banks and European lenders. Insurance markets were based in London. Shipping firms were international. Textile profits accumulated overseas. The South generated leverage, but it didn't own the plumbing that turned leverage into resilience as long as cotton flowed. This didn't matter. The moment it didn't, everything would. That moment arrived with war. When southern states seceded in 1860–61, leaders believed cotton would be their ultimate weapon. Cut off exports, they reasoned, and Britain would intervene. Factories would shut down, workers would riot, governments would pressure Washington, King Cotton would rule. But the American Civil War was also a brutal lesson in financial reality. Control over a commodity does not equal control over the system that prices it, finances it, and replaces it. The collapse didn't arrive as justice, it arrived as disintegration. As blockades tightened, cotton exports became unreliable. Loans written against future harvests became worthless. Insurance contracts failed. Balance sheets collapsed. Southern planters found themselves over-leveraged. Banks stopped lending. Merchants demanded cash. A system dependent on constant motion ceased. And while the South choked financially, the world did something deeply inconvenient. It adapted. British manufacturers suffered during the cotton famine, but they did not collapse cotton. Cultivation expanded in India and Egypt. Supply chains rerouted. It wasn't painless, but it was survivable. This revealed the real hierarchy of power. The South controlled production. Global finance controlled substitution. And substitution is the ultimate weapon against leverage. Inside the Confederacy, consequences were catastrophic. Cotton lost credibility as collateral. Credit evaporated. Governments printed money. Inflation surged. Prices detached from wages. Ordinary people, enslaved individuals, poor whites, small farmers, absorbed the shock first. Elites preserved value in land, goods, and foreign currency. This was not a reckoning. It was a collapse after the war. Cotton remained important, but it no longer anchored global finance. The South was absorbed into a national financial system dominated by northern banks, industrial capital, and federal authority. Dependency replaced dominance. Enslaved people gained legal freedom, yet were pushed into sharecropping, debt peonage, and new forms of coercion. Financial systems adapted faster than justice did, and this is where the story stops being about the 19th century. Societies still mistake control over production for control over power. They assume indispensability guarantees protection. They confuse leverage with sovereignty. But real financial power doesn't live in resources, it lives in credit systems, insurance markets, shipping networks, and institutions capable of absorbing shock. History doesn't repeat, financial illusions do. And they usually fail the same way, slowly at first, then everywhere at once. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe to YieldVerse, where history reveals the hidden mechanics of power.